Alright, and it's time for another episode. Here we go. This is going to be, this is a bit delayed. I want to do a podcast and release it every week, and I fell behind this week for a couple of reasons. One of them involving my birthday. I just turned 35, I think. Yeah, 35. Who knows? And it was a lot of fun. I went to go see Korn. Well, who else? It was Dead, D-E-D, Dead. It was Yellow Wolf, Stone Sour, Skillet, and I'm probably forgetting one. But anyway, and those were all the lineup bands to Korn, and my amazing girlfriend Laura, she got tickets for us to go. So, because I saw that popped up, and the concert was on my birthday on July 30th. So Facebook is good for that. It was like, hey, you want to see Korn, don't you? On your birthday of all times. Yes, I do. They just had a latest album come out, and it's really good, and I don't care what people say. I love it. So I usually don't listen to critics. I try to experience it for myself, especially with an album. It's so easy to just listen to. You put it on the background, and if it stands out, it stands out. And if you want to listen to it again, you do, and then it's good. So if it resonates, it resonates. And this last album did because, for themes that I'm going to talk about today, difficult things. It's not all about video games. Sometimes it's about real life stuff. And the latest album for Korn, again, and all their albums kind of do in some way or another, but they sort of went back to their roots in sound, and then in subject matter, it's about mental health. It's about feeling like shit and trying to get over it and get through it. And the album came out during a difficult time just recently in my life. So that's what I'm going to talk about now, is about suicide. And suicide, there is never not a good time to bring it up, because it's always going to crop up. It's always going to just rear its ugly head, and somebody famous is going to do it, and people are going to react, and they're going to freak out, and you get the full range of emotions that are accompanied with mourning. The recent suicide of Chester Bennington, and you had Chris Cornell not long ago either, Robin Williams. And Robin Williams I'm a huge fan of his, for how warped and how funny he is, all of that, it all tied into his personality, and his personality involved having depression, and that sort of reflects in the art. And if you have it, you can see it. You can see it in the music, for instance, with Chester. I resonated with Linkin Park and their music from the second I heard it, a long time ago. And ever since then, I've been a fan, been a real fan. And it's the lyrics, really, just the way things are said, and the way the lyrics are describing, different mentalities that come up, is really similar across people with depression. And I think that's, going to be one of the main reasons why anybody who also shares these feelings will be drawn to the art, because people who suffer from depression make art that is, more often than not about it. It's either escaping it, which that in itself is about it, or it's about it. And more cases than not, it's about the depression, because that is the outlet with which to explore those feelings. And again, it's difficult. It's difficult to talk about. Like, I'm having a difficulty talking about this even right now, and I'm trying to be more open about it. And, when talking person to person, I'm even more open about it. But this is something that's like, like a work of art. And making a fucking podcast is so not even close to being like a work of art. But similarly, it's being put out there for the world to see and the world to judge and people to listen to, and and then your mind just goes down this rabbit hole. So talking about it is important. It's important for not only the people who suffer from it, but it's important for people who don't suffer from it to understand. It's interesting to think about. One of the things I learned about with in psychology class going to college was the history of how people handled mental illness as a whole. You look at schizophrenia as a really good example. Nobody even believed it existed for the longest time. No one wanted to believe it existed. Multiple personality disorder, what's that? They're crazy. How easy it was, you looking at the history of mental illness, to be stigmatized. You talk about, biblical stories about people having epileptic seizures being interpreted as being possessed by the devil, or being sent holy messages on high, and all the symptoms that they're describing, and the bright light, and falling to the ground, and convulsing, and okay, this is mental illness. These are mental issues that, happen to possess the right kind of person in the right time. And people were afraid, and so they embraced it, and as opposed to, so many times when people are afraid and they fear it, but as far as religious fervor goes, if you fear something but you believe it's from on high, you have more a tendency to revere it and follow it than to turn away, and it's all on how it's talked about. So, coming out of the dark ages, mental illness. Just recently, the military with it, it has barely started to acknowledge it as being an issue, So for it to be a relatively new thing, for it to not be so stigmatized, it's a recently new thing for it not to be stigmatized, and that's a good thing. It is a good thing, but there's a lot of work that needs to get done. Society in general, and so personally, my personal experience with depression goes all the way back. From as long as I can remember, I've been a morbid kid who has always had death on his mind. I remember obsessing. My obsession starting very early. I distinctly have a memory going back to about when I was 5, playing with my knife, thinking about what it would be like to cut my wrists. During, in the background of these thoughts, my parents are tearing each other to pieces, arguing, and quite literally, like physical and. You can hear things getting thrown around in the background, and you can hear screaming and fighting, and I'm in my room hiding, leaning against my dad's 8-track player, thinking about it was just a casual thought. It wasn't anything serious, and it just happened. It was like, wow, I wonder what it would be like. I wonder what it would feel like. And then of course. The thought sticks out to me because I remember thinking how unusual the thought was, and then afterwards thinking, well, okay, you put the pieces together, and you realize, okay, well, if I do that, I'll probably die. Then you start thinking, well, what would it be like to die? And coming from the cult background, you have you have the constant fear of permadeath, right? Permadeath is what happens if God kills you, because you can't come back. So death was always a heavy subject to talk about, or a common subject, but a very common subject to talk about within the cult, because it was the overarching motivating factor to do good, right? You don't want to get killed forever by God when Armageddon happens, right? So it's not like I was not around death as a subject matter, and because I was, but the thought, having suddenly applied it to myself, that was what was new and different at the time. I mean, the new being is that it happened very young, but I remember, when it solidified, because the fear had always been there before then, but it sort of solidified around that time to the point where death has just become like this little bird on my shoulder, you know, or demon, you could probably call it. The analogy, the angel and demon on the shoulder. Well, when you have depression, it's usually only the demon, and then he just takes a different form when you're going manic. It just becomes a hyperactive demon. But with this little death demon, he sits on your shoulder and is always whispering in your ear. Well, you could always just fucking kill yourself, Like and it's usually the natural progression of thoughts as you work your way down problem solving, and you always sort of land on death in one way or another, and it goes to a saying my good friend Corey told me, is that if you think too big, all you'll see is the grave. And it's true. But how can you not think big, right? You have to be able to have that thought and not let it overcome you. And for normal people who don't suffer from depression, the thought doesn't leech onto them. It's sort of a fact of life and inevitability. You think it, you move on, you might get sad. It's not this overarching problem. And what it becomes is one of the reasons why I got so into philosophy. Because, as I get older, my dad suffers from being bipolar, and as do I. And there is some genetic influence there, although it's not always 100%. But there's enough of a connection. There's enough of a connection that it makes sense to point out. And with my dad, being bipolar, for him, it was always this roller coaster, and it made for a very inconsistent, unpredictable kind of life. I don't know if he struggled with thoughts of death as much as I do or have. It's one thing that I haven't really been able to ask him or talk about. I don't really care, because I guess it just doesn't matter for me to get his insight on it, because it's my own personal struggle that affects me in a very unique way. But I guess also at the same time, I've learned enough, having lived with the man, on when he was able to control his condition and the better times that he was able to control it versus not. I have my entire childhood experience to pull on with trial and error on what happened. Now, you wouldn't think directly that being bipolar, it's like, okay, I want to talk about suicide, but I'm also talking about bipolar, and you can also talk about OCPD and, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and all these other issues. It all ties in together. And it all ties in together, not all the time for everybody, but it's going to inevitably tie in together. Any mental issue that you could have could link into with suicide, because people don't just suffer from one thing. If they have a problem, if their brain is messed up, it's messed up in a way that is going to be like, it's going to cover a wide range of topics, right? It's going to cover different avenues of their lives. And no one's just, I feel sad sometimes, and that's all I have to deal with, and we'll call that depression, and it can be over. That's not the case. The case is that you're set up for a lifetime of dealing with a multifaceted issue that is going to change as you get older. And so in my case, it was, as I'm getting older, I'm looking for ways to deal with it. And Christianity didn't help. And actually, at least the Christianity that I was exposed to didn't help. And at the time, that meant, okay, well, Christianity isn't going to work. So I turned to Buddhism for a while. And when I think back on my times as a Buddhist, I was a Buddhist for 3 years. And, which included shaving my head and being a vegetarian, which I only lasted for about 6 months. It was hot dogs. Hot dogs broke me. But I tried it out anyway, and I studied for a year and a half under the Mahayana Buddhists, and they are Burmese. The Burmese Buddhists. There's a Burmese Buddhist temple not far from where I lived in Rockford. And so I went there and I studied for about a year and a half, and then I moved on to Zen, and I studied Zen Buddhism for about another year and a half. I think back on those days as being a very centering time. The problem with Buddhism is usually the problem with most religions is that they try to sell themselves as a way of life and not a religion. It's a religion. Buddhism is a religion. Buddhism involves a very important aspect of a way of life that I think more people should adopt. But that's common in all religious practices. The difference with Buddhism is that their specific meditation, or the meditations that have come about through Buddhism, have done so with the idea of suffering and impermanence and death in mind. And so it is tailored towards people who are highly aware of their own suffering, who have an acute sense of their own death, and who have a hard time living because of it. And where Buddhism goes right is they have multiple practices involving meditation. All that I've tried have been helpful in one way or another, and have their benefits and uses in not just helping people with depression, but maintaining a degree of calm and focus under adversity, and that can be one of the biggest problems to overcome in suffering from depression. And so when I think back to my time as a Buddhist, I recall it really fondly, and it makes me want to go back to meditation, and I've been seriously considering going back to meditation. Not Buddhism, but because all religions are problematic and that, they're wrong. At least that's my viewpoint, is that they're all wrong. Just some of them are more right than others in very helpful ways, and it's not good to discredit all religion. And these are old systems of thought that have benefits, that can still have benefits. But that's another topic. So moving on to in dealing with depression, I guess the first thing to talk about would be, not only just starting with myself, but starting with the public perception, because the first thing you encounter when having depression is having to live with it. And when you have to live with something, you have to deal with other people. And so how other people react to it is really important to take note of. And it's very easy to say, oh, well, everyone's just like this, or everyone's just like that when it comes to dealing with depression and suicide. But it's really just how it feels, because you encounter so many people who can take a negative bent, a negative interpretation. It's how it feels, because there are a lot of people who can take the negative interpretation of it and then just look at that as being the only way that things are when someone commits suicide. Okay, and what I mean by that is this: is you get the whole, this is part of the aspect of why Christianity can be harmful as far as suicide goes, is that because one of the beliefs touted more strongly among some Christians than others is that, when you commit suicide, it is an unforgivable sin in the eyes of God. And so that person is not going to heaven, or not getting resurrected, depending on the belief. Suicide gets a really bad taboo from Christianity in some ways, and I think that's why some people might feel justified in being so harsh on the people who do end up committing suicide. When I was a young lass, my best friend at the time, his first name was Scotty, his dad killed himself after a long fit of depression. He hung himself, and it was a really, really difficult funeral. And it was during a time when my parents were splitting, or starting to split, and having problems, and so the congregation I was in at the time was sort of taking sides against my mom or with her, and some people they just didn't care and they were friends with my mom and myself, and then other people had took my father's side and refused to talk to my mom. And I mention that only because in this instance, Jehovah's Witnesses view suicide as an unforgivable sin. And it was one of the things that no one wanted to talk about at the funeral. It was a palpable thing. And one of the women who was having a get-together for the family after the funeral refused to let my mom come, and therefore me, and our families were really close. And so that hurt. So the division that was happening with my parents, sort of got in the way. And I'm just remembering this and talking about it now because, it was all around suicide, my best friend's dad. And so this is not anything that I'm unfamiliar with at all. My cousin killed himself, and it is just depression. It makes you feel like it's taken out your family when something like that happens, and you feel like it's after your family. From my perspective, only because I understand those thoughts, but then at the same time I have to see the aftermath, and again back to the public perception. So you get a couple different takes on it. You get, there are people who are mourning, and that's a very difficult process to go through, and so there's a lot of emotional reaction. There's anger and there's hatred that comes with it. And if you've had a relative or a close relative or distant relative, anybody close to you commit suicide, the emotions that come along with it can get in the way. And so you have people who say that it's cowardly. You have people that can say that it's narcissistic, that it's giving up, that it's all these things. And that's really not the whole picture. I can understand the perspective viewing, a teen, for instance, getting bullied and shamed and ending up committing suicide, right? You could say, okay, well, this is just a complete inability to handle these social pressures, and it might be a cowardice act, right? There might be, yes, some people who do it for those reasons. I think for the most part, that's not the case. For the most part, it's escaping. It's an escape, and it's not cowardly at all, actually. And of course, it would be hard to know that it's not cowardly until you're in the moment when you're faced with having to make the decision, like, should I do it? And because it's the scariest fucking thing you're gonna ask yourself ever. It's the scariest thing I've ever asked myself in the moment, and I'll get to that. But what it is more so than just being cowardly, more so than all these other things. What's happening in the brain is you're feeling either too much stimulation or nothing at all, right? And so there are different stages and different levels, different depths of it. And for a normal person, they just get sad. Right? Something sad will happen and they will feel sad. And there is a surface level depression that I feel like everybody knows what it's like. But if you don't have depression as a problem, as a condition, then you never know what it's like to go deeper. And there is a deeper layer. And there are multiple different deeper layers, and those layers depend on, again, what else you suffer from. So if you have an obsessive compulsive problem, and your mind starts to fixate on something and go obsessive, then that can spiral into depression. And so you can feel nothing and also everything at the same time. Like completely obsessed by something, while at the same time, nothing matters. Nothing matters, but everything hurts, right? Any foreign stimulus is an overwhelming problem that cannot be solved, because one of the things that can happen when you start to go into a depressive state, and when you reach a state of depression, is that you lose your ability to problem solve, which is why it's really hard to do like art, for instance. And if you use art as a therapy for your depression and to help you get insight into it, the fact that when it hits you and you can't do art, you know, that's a spiral that can take you down. So you're having different levels, going back to the different levels of depression. In addition to mixing with problems, you can, you know, being manic depressive is sort of like, you can have the mania and you can have the depression, but then also you can have both, which ties into what I had said before, where nothing matters but everything hurts. So while at the same time that you're having this feeling of overwhelming craziness and a need to drastically change your life in some fundamental way as a means to escape, you also think that none of it matters anyway, and that all of it's pointless, and that, you know, and all these other things that you think when you're only in a depressive state. So you can get a combination of both too, and then you can also just get, you know, either mania or either depression, and those in themselves can be dangerous in their own respects. You know, feeling invincible. You know, this is one of the things that I watched my dad go through. You know, you get a harebrained idea, you feel invincible, you do it, you spend all the family's money, and then you're poor. You just blow thousands and thousands of dollars on just one harebrained idea after the next in this like feudalistic attempt for fame and recognition. And that was what it was like, you know, living with somebody who had it. But I certainly understand that, you know, and then you can also have just the nothingness, the emptiness, and it's a complete empty pit. That's just what it feels like. And sort of like the existential abyss. You know, and this is one of the things that I've come up to more than once. So, and what happens is the sort of telescoping, I don't know if I'm saying that right, a telescoping effect of you see your death, you see your end, and you try to conceive of the nothingness that follows. Then you zoom out and you see the world without you, and the world continuing without you, and your friends and your family all continuing without you, and you not being there to share in any more stimuli whatsoever. And then it zooms back in and back out and back in and back out, you know, to all these concepts concerning that. And it can feel so overwhelming and racing in sort of like this circle that you feel nothing but pure terror. That's part of what my experience has been with in suffering from depression and suicide, is that what, you know, in that while I'm terrified of death, I also can't stop thinking about it. So the general perception surrounding it then can become trepidatious. Anybody who's smart is going to approach somebody with severe depression trepidatiously. And I say that having, you know, obviously suffering from it. Like, if you weren't trepidatious around somebody who has these problems, who has these issues, I feel like you're setting yourself up. And what happens over the years then, in living with it, is that you can become very fatiguing for the people around you. And God bless anybody who is in a relationship with somebody who suffers from depression. You people are saints. You're true saints for dealing with it on your end, because it never ends. And so when you're suffering from it and it comes up again, it feels distressing, right? Because in your brain, it's warning sign, warning sign, warning sign. You can't just feel down, right? You have to feel down knowing that potentially you could be down for a long time, a week, a month. My last depressive episode lasted 9 days. And, the further down you go, the worse it gets, the more painful it becomes. And and you have to learn over time how to talk about it, because if you don't learn how to talk about it to people, especially who are close to you, they suffer from empathetic fatigue, because it's just, it's this fucking problem again. Here's this problem. Oh my God, this thing I can't solve and I can make worse. Because that's the thing, you can't stop it from happening. You can lessen its effects with meditation, medicine, exercise, a routine. There's all these things that you can do to sort of lessen the effects. You'll see that a lot of people who suffer from depression stay busy. There's a reason for that, a sense of constant purpose. You need a constant purpose to sort of keep yourself from thinking of this existential dread, and it's not this willful thing. It's just this thing that always just comes up in your head. I wish I could go a week without thinking about death, but I can't. It's just how it is, And on a bad week, I wish I could go a day without thinking about killing myself, but you can't. You can't when that's what your brain is, I can make it worse, but I can't stop it. And that's just the reality of it. And so when it starts getting bad, you kind of have to develop a way to talk about it sort of casually so that you're not setting off warning bells. Because while the subject matter is difficult, you have to not sound like how it feels, right? So in your brain, it's like, so your brain is feeling this indescribable, incalculable, unmeasurable amount of anxiety or pain or distress. Distress is another common one. So anxiety, pain, distress, nothingness, and that can be distressing at the same time, because not feeling anything can be distressing. Distressing. You'll have, you could watch a terrible thing happen to somebody and not feel anything, and somebody could be like, your close friend, and it just makes you feel like when you come out of it that you're a terrible human being. But it's not you that's at being the terrible human being. It's this condition that you don't have a handle on that is making you act terrible. And so talking about it is important, but how you talk about it is also important. Which is why when you look at interviews, like you look at Chester in interviews from him, where he's talking about it, and it's just casual. It's just, it almost sounds lighthearted, That's developed out of fear of making everyone around you so tired of hearing about it that you have no one around you, right? And and how I suffer from it is where it can make you very distant, can make me very distant. I have a very hard time talking about myself, and that's that's because it's just how I write in my journal. So sometimes I say you and I'm talking to myself, and I don't really mean I. But so I can easily distance myself from other people because of this feeling of emotional instability, and that can make you seem that can make you come off as being aloof or not caring, or just a general jerk, or somebody who's tough to crack, or like all these perceptions that come along with someone who seems like they're distant, and it causes me to want to be alone a lot, and that has its own set of problems. It also helps because it helps for me to process things by myself, but that's also tied into other issues. It's not just solely the depression, but then again, you can, I can be lost in a depressive state for a few days before even realizing that I'm in it, and then I realize that I'm in it, and and it's because I've been entertaining just terrible thoughts. But again, time can warp when these things are happening, and you can lose weeks, months of your life not talking to friends, not building relationships, having these isolated thoughts of, you don't want to share the suffering with other people. You don't want to burden them with it. See, the biggest problem with the depression depression on this level is also being a burden. You don't want to have anyone else suffer because of you, because the amount of suffering that someone who with depression has is tenfold. And it could happen. It's just on a monthly basis. You're going through an extreme mindset that's causing you distress and pain, and so you understand what suffering is on a level that I don't think a lot of people can relate to until something tragic happens, which is what causes the introspection. And so by way of surviving, you have to become introspective when you have depression, or else it just takes you out. And this is where philosophy comes into play real heavily, because philosophy for me, I went into college and discovered that, hey, there's philosophy. Oh my God. And it's teaching you how to think. And you're shown how to think by way of these different thinkers. And each one is showing you how to think about the world in their own way. And they're taking you through this analytical process of being able to come to how you come to a conclusion, and then how you break it down to look at things. This has been extremely helpful for me. Learning philosophy in some ways has saved my life, or just discovering philosophy in some ways has saved my life, because I've been able to look at my actions, look at my thought process, look at the things that come from it, and react and set myself parameters to act, because I understand the consequences when I don't do it. So here's a good example of what will happen. There's a phrase that I use that has just saved me more than once, and it's, this too shall pass, right? Yeah, okay, biblical. But the basic concept is, it's not going to last. And that's the hardest thing to recognize when you're suffering from depression. It's not going to last. But it feels like it is. And in some ways, it is always going to last. But what I mean by that when I say that to myself is that I'm gonna come through it. It's gonna end at some point. It's not gonna keep going forever. It's gonna run its course. I'll gently come out of it, and then I won't feel like I want to die anymore. And knowing that during extreme mental conditions, and not just for depression, but I'll get the urge to completely uproot and destroy my life, for instance, do something really stupid that will get me rejected by friends, family, lovers, it doesn't matter. Over the years, it is just, depression can cause you to destroy your relationships so that you feel justified in being isolated, and then the isolation brings on a deeper set of problems and deeper depression, or state of depression, and you can, and then again, you spiral. So relationships and people's perceptions of the problem play a big factor. Stability is extremely important with people who suffer depression. Things that you can count on, a routine, can be very important. And relationships, positive relationships, can be very important. But effort has to be applied on both ends. Unfortunately, I think, there's no way to understand who has to apply more effort depending on the condition. I've been able to manage my condition up until recently pretty well, not having to take medications. But I'm reaching a point where I have to look at that as a reality, because it's gotten worse. I have, I've been severely suicidal more than once in my life. The last time, it was a while ago. It was back when I was going to the atelier that I was going to, the Ravenswood Atelier. It was during that time, and I really wanted to die, and it was a terrible thing to feel, and just not wanting to be anymore, not wanting to have, not wanting to have any sort of stimulus, or dealing with anybody, dealing with myself especially. So the last time that happened, well, there's been other times since then, but that had been the first major one since moving back to Chicago, because I lived in Rockford for a while, and where my life had really changed, and then dramatically changed for the worse, because my fiance at the time broke up with me. I dropped out of college to go to this atelier, and it was another 3 years down the road for education, So at the same time, I found something that was going to give me all the skill that I'd ever hoped for. Yeah. I was seeing a lot of different changes, dramatic changes in my life, and not having a lot of close friends with me at the time. And I was going back and forth to Rockford a lot at the time. But during the times that I couldn't, was when this was really, when it really took hold, and of course dealing with the breakup, when you're with somebody for like 7 years, and you think you're going to be with them, and then things fall apart, and it's partially your fault, or even mostly your fault, because that's going to be also the hard truth to swallow, is that like a lot of times when shit goes wrong in relationships, if you're the depressed one, it's your fault. This isn't saying that there aren't shitty people in the world, but like you find yourself picking shitty people because that's all you feel that you can get, because that's all you're worth in your head. So, the sense of worthlessness makes you make bad life choices because that's all you deserve. Why choose anything better? Why shoot for anything better when it doesn't matter, right? So, depression stumps your inability to solve problems, to make those connections, to see the end, to see a way out. You can't see that there is even a way out. So turning to philosophy has helped me say, okay, there is never a time when I haven't come out of it. And so I have to assume then I will come out of it. If I do come out of it, and when I do, I don't want to die, then I have to realize that these thoughts I shouldn't take seriously. They just have to be there. And I have to leave them there. And by leaving them there and not indulging them, and knowing that it's going to pass, and that I'm going to come out of it, and that I'm going to feel regret for anything I did during the times that I'm feeling that, unless I kill myself, and then I won't be allowed to feel regret. But I know that if it would be a regretful decision, then philosophy has helped me make my brain big enough to wrap my head around these problems in such a way that I can analyze them and I can see the best path, the best path forward. It also prevents me from indulging, and when I say indulging, I mean like a sort of an emotional indulgence where it kind of forces me to have to be neutral in my feelings. When I was younger, it was very easy to give in to the feelings of blissful happiness and feeling invincible, and you never can feel more happy and more empowered in your entire life than when the mania kicks in, and then you start a fight, and and then you get your ass handed to you, and you're like, oh, I'm not invincible, or you get into a motorcycle accident. It's like, wow, I shouldn't have taken a 30-mile-an-hour turn on a gravel road because I'm not invincible. And so you make these really stupid decisions because those are the decisions that you would make if you actually were invincible. But since no one is, it's just, you look back and you think, well, clearly that was the dumbest decision I could have made at the time. And when you're not in that state, you can't see how you could have possibly rationalized making that decision. And so you learn the hard way over the years. And that's another aspect that doesn't make life easy. School was a big help for me, and I didn't realize how important it was until after I left. And it's one of the reasons why I stayed in for so long. Of course, I didn't know it at the time, but another reason was that you have to put yourself back together after leaving a cult. There's a lot you have to relearn, and you have to learn how to learn, and then learn how to unlearn something, and then learn new shit. So that takes a while, and that was one of the things that I was doing. But at the same time, school provided a routine. It provided a system that I could operate within, and I learned how to excel within it. And it felt really good. It was a community that always changed for me because I was moving around with schools. But it was still a community that I felt like-minded with because everyone seemed to be, whether we agreed or disagreed, everyone seemed to be chasing the same thing, which is knowledge. Of some extent, to some extent, everyone was chasing knowledge, and I think that's really safe to say. And I felt very just welcomed by the environment, and found that I could thrive in it, and developed a love of knowing things, and indulged my curiosity. But keeping busy, you have your semesters, and you sign up for your courses, and it's always something to look forward to, and then you have the class, and then the assignments within the class, and then you have to manage your day around school. So it's this higher purpose, and then all life sort of works around this major goal, which is to just obtain knowledge, right? It was an amazing feeling that I stretched as long as I could before I got burnt out on it. And when I got burnt out on it, I left, and so then there was a void. There's a void, and you're missing a community, and you're not around people, and it's sort of like a void that I'm still kind of in, that I still sort of wish I could have, that I really only don't have now because of myself. But at the same time, a school that I could go to, or a school that I wanna, or school that I run myself, right? These are all things that I think about because you need to move on with your career and your life, but at the same time, you want to have a community around you. You want to have a sense of purpose around you. And all those things are helpful when you're feeling depressive. You're feeling the depression and so my family and my friends have been amazing in helping me with this, whether they realize it or not. Because I'm not the greatest friend. I very easily get lost and realize that I haven't talked to somebody for months, and in my head, it's not that long of time, and so it can be draining. The responsibility for communication is left to them more than it should be, and so that's one of the things that I have to work on, obviously. But in filling that void, I found a good routine with the job that I had landed in Chicago, working for what ended up becoming, people who I call my second family. And it was a general contracting job working in a historical landmark in Chicago. and they were, I just got a gift of art books from Beth. She's my second mother, and from this family I had in Chicago, and they were always there for me, and they understood my strangeness, and didn't shy away from including me and thinking about me, but mainly in understanding that I had depression. It was very welcoming, and so I developed a routine with that, and in my scheduling, with knowing what I was going to do, every week before the week started, planning my week out. So one of the things that I did would, okay, know which days that I was working and which days that I wasn't, and what I was going to do on those days, and I could plan out, depending on how I was going to feel, what my schedule was going to be. That routine became very sustainable for me and ended up working pretty well. So I liken my mind, over the years, I've thought about it sort of as an ever-changing labyrinth that I have to learn how to navigate through. And that came out of Buddhism, and it came out of philosophy, until I sort of reached this conclusion of having to learn how to control what was happening, control the damage that I could do when I was feeling the things that I was feeling, and analyze it so that I could get a better idea of how to better act in the future. So it's sort of working for yourself in the future, really, is what you have to think about or force myself to think about when it happens, when it starts to come on. And there can be anxiety that comes with it, because you're never sure if this time is going to be the time when it takes you into a deep depressive state. Is me feeling sad right now mean that tomorrow I'm going to start down this path, or am I just sad today? And so then you can get anxiety from feeling this sadness, and then the anxiety can fuel the sadness, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, you are actually depressed. So learning how to not overreact when the feelings come on, learning how to watch the feelings instead of sort of indulging them, learning to wait. If I come to a conclusion while I'm feeling depression, I, as a general rule, don't act on it until I'm out. And so if I come out of it and it's still a good idea, then there's a better chance that I'm going to go through with it. And that can make me seem like I'm dragging my feet on stuff. And in some ways I am, and in other ways I'm not. I've made commitments while feeling invincible, and realized that those were the most unrealistic commitments I could have made. Or I've made commitments, or decided not to do something because I was depressed, and deeply regretted it. Like I've missed events. I've missed, going and having fun with people, and I've missed a lot. There have been a lot of things in my life that I didn't do because of depression. So it makes for, okay, so I working at my last job. I worked at my last job in Chicago for 7 years, right? I'm not an unstable person on paper when it comes to, like just looking at my work history, for instance. You wouldn't think I was an unstable person, right? But that's certainly not how it feels. It feels like I'm always on a roller coaster, and sometimes I just happen to be going level. But I almost always feel like I'm either on a gradual up or a gradual down, and this constant sort of wave, and then of course either one can suddenly spike, but it's still a roller coaster. And so emotionally, I don't feel stable, and the lack of feeling stable prevents me. I'm noticing now prevents me from making commitments or going after things that I would have gone after before, and this is why, the way depression gets worse is that it changes. It doesn't stay the same. Once you solve one aspect of it or feel like you can overcome one aspect of it, you only get a handle on that for so long, and then something else crops up or comes at you in a different way, and then you have to try to solve that and figure out the solution to that without, these feelings or this new reaction, without it taking you out or forcing you to ruin a friendship or do anything else that you could come up with as justification. So the last bout of extreme depression that I felt was just recently, at the end of last year and the start of this year, into probably May or so. This is, about May. Is the longest bout of depression that I've ever had in my life, and it was really scary for me. I mean, I was scared for myself because I was in unknown territory, and I'm not going to give all the specifics as to what led to it, but because it's too long and too stupid to talk about. But I had had a series of failures in a business prospect, and at the time, last year, I was in unstable living conditions, and unstable living conditions can provide an environment that just makes it worse. A lot of things, environment plays a huge factor with depression. If you're in an environment that feels unstable or is not something that you can count on a daily basis to be something that you can predict, you are going to more quickly and more dramatically have problems, I feel like, as a general rule. And that's what happened to me is what ended up happening in this unstable environment was it induced a flashback, which is not something I'd ever experienced before, but the flashback was part of the PTSD that I suffer from child abuse. And it is, like I said, it's not anything I ever experienced before. And it was an event that, I'm still recovering from. And what happened was, the conditions were right, that I felt like a child again, being abused by my dad. And it caused me to go back in time. And I didn't see the room I was in. I didn't see the people I was looking at. I just saw this time when I was a kid. And I was reliving it when I was a kid. Only I'm reliving it as an adult. And so, you're obviously stronger as an adult. And I was in the bathroom when it happened. And voila, there's holes in the walls. And the bathroom I just wrecked the bathroom because I had this flashback and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I came to these terrified looks and these faces that I recognized having when I was a kid. And then you see yourself as a monster, and you in the eyes of who you used to be, dealing with this monster that you used to live with, and now you're being that. So that sent me down into a really, really, really deep depression that I didn't realize I was in for a long time until I started to come out of it. But during the process of all of it, Laura and I moved and got our own place away from the environment that we were in, the harmful environment that we were in, and it didn't get any better right away. And because what happened was, it felt like a hard reset. it felt like all the work I had done up into that point had gone away, and I was back at square one with this raw emotion that I used to know how to temper. I used to know how to control, and now it had all new power over me, and that meant my extremes were more extreme, and those extremes were harder to control. So thankfully, knowing, so I say this and I say it felt like a hard reset, but in many ways it wasn't, because having lived with it up to this point, being 35, I developed enough safety mechanisms in place for myself to know that, like, okay, I still shouldn't make drastic decisions under this mindset, but at the same time, I'm under the influence of this mindset more so than ever before on a daily basis. So, with the help of my friends, I was able to see that, like, okay, the right path is get out, right? First and foremost, the next is to reorganize yourself and try to see what's in your power to control. What are you able to change right now, and then go from there, right? So that is what I was able to do. But at the same time, it's sort of exploring the depths of this depression on a more consistent basis. And so over the months, having moved and having failed in a business attempt sort of left me having to replan my reason for moving to Michigan, because my entire reason to move to Michigan was for this one specific purpose, for this business, and then all these other things were going to come into place around it, and all of that goes away. And so you're stuck feeling suicidal, and at the same time having nothing to look forward to, right? No sense of major purpose to direct myself towards, as a way to focus, to like I said again, like, you can't stop it from happening, but you can lessen it, and sort of having a purpose and having things to look forward to, it can help. And so in this way, in this case, I didn't have that. I had to sort of figure it all out and I got a series of shitty jobs working with, I got a construction job, another construction job working with, some shitty people, and it was just one failure after the next. Like, tried to buy a car. Well, there are no lemon laws in Michigan. It's nothing but bootstraps. Everyone's out to get everybody. Everyone's out to fuck everybody. And so fucking people in business is just a way of being here as far as selling cars goes. And I'm sure it's like that in other areas. And so that failed, right? Dropped a few $1,000s for nothing on that. It was just losing money, losing time, not having a sense of purpose, not knowing where I should go from here, and if staying in Michigan was even worth it. So all these issues, all these questions and no answers were coming up. But the biggest change now, again, starting to come out of it. At the time, I could really see how this happens to people, right? I'm looking for a job. I'm out of work. I'm running out of money. One thing leads to another. Every day, I'm trapped in this new place that I got, that we rented to escape from the bad environment. But the situation, the conditions were still bad, and this is the path to suicide. This is what happens to people. They get down, they get desperate. They don't have a job, they're running out of money, they're not eating right? They're sitting around all day looking for a job. It feels useless, it feels like purgatory, and you're just running in place, sending out application after application, and nothing's working. No one wants to work with you. I was still teaching at the time, and that was the only good thing that I had. And I don't know how bad it would have gotten had I not had teaching. But that was the only thing at the time that kept me justified in wanting to stay in Michigan. But it also gave me, you know, it's hard to say that it gave me hope. I can say that it gave me something to look forward to as I was doing it, but I can say that I really felt nothing until I was in the classroom interacting with people. And then, you get the positive feedback and you feel good, and that lasts for a day, and then you're back in hell looking for another job, because teaching is not sustaining you. And so construction companies don't want to work with teachers, right? They need somebody who is going to be at their beck and call for pennies. The job market in Michigan is terrible, and it doesn't favor creative types. And in other words, no one wants to work with you, and they want everything, and they don't want to pay for it. So you're looking at jobs that are like, you have to know how to do everything for $10 an hour, and so you feel like people don't value you, people don't value what you're capable of, and then during this time, I'd pulled my back really bad, and again, this is just what tends to happen to people who are out of work and who get depressed. And so I pull my back, and it's like just 2 weeks of more than 2 weeks. It was about a month of agony where and I could see at that point that things were going downhill really quickly. And I also could see like why someone might then become addicted to painkillers. Because why people get addicted to painkillers. If you look in America at the highest concentrations of suicide in the western part of the country, it also just so happens to be the same part of the country that has the highest problem with addiction to prescription medications, predominantly painkillers. There's got to be some kind of link. There has to be. I just, and because what happens is you get tired of feeling, and you get tired of feeling anything, and you really just get tired of having emotions in general, because indulging them goes too far, and you ruin your life, and having them to the extreme is painful. It's not pleasant, so you start to avoid prolonged happiness, because you know where that can go, and it's hard to ignore prolonged sadness, but at least sadness doesn't make you run off and do something really, really stupid as fast, as effectively. So like, wanting to stay level, wanting to just have a day where you don't feel something extreme, becomes really desirable, and then you start taking pills, or in my case, like when I was living where I was living before, you have access to a lot of weed, and so every day you just as high as you can get, so you don't have to feel like yourself, and that's not healthy, not in the slightest. And so I saw where the path was going. Hurting my back, looking for work, not having much to live for, not knowing where I was going, what I was even looking for, and that's just at the start of this year was the longest stint of time where I felt like that. And I remember distinctly more than once, but there was one particular night where I just woke up at it's like 3 a.m, and I thought to myself, I should kill myself. I should do it today. And I stopped myself right then and there. Didn't get out of bed. I just sat there, and I sat with that thought. And I was like, okay, well, why? You gotta ask yourself these questions. Why? Well, because there's no way out. And then but hasn't there been a way out before? Well, yeah. Think back to the last time that you felt this way. Okay. And you start to have this inner dialogue. I think I should do it. Well, you know, how many funerals have you been to? Friends and family who have killed themselves. What is that like? And I worked myself through the process of looking at the full scope of the event. Should I do it? And obviously I decided not to, but it was a point where I had seriously considered it. The last time it happened was probably the closest I'd ever come, and that was towards the very end of my schooling. I was really, really depressed going to the Atelier, and it's not the Atelier's fault, but it was like, I don't know what it was. But towards the end, maybe it was just how difficult the training can be, and how I took it at the time. I don't know. It might have been a number of things, but no one's fault other than my own. But towards the end of the schooling, you're looking for as extreme as the training can be, and how rigorous, and then having to work on top of that. When it comes time for you to let loose, it can happen in extremes. And so, I had owned a couple of guns at the time, and I'd gotten really drunk and was partying with people I shouldn't have been partying with, and I got involved with a group of people I shouldn't have gotten involved with at all, especially as far as relationship goes. And I just met a girl who was really, really bad for me, and we were doing a lot of drinking. And I just remember one night coming home after having a vicious argument with this girl, and just going to the bathroom and putting the gun in my mouth and trying it out, going through the motions. And I remember staring at myself in the mirror with the gun in my mouth, thinking, okay, this is the last thing I'm going to see. And feeling totally, I was completely drunk. It was a blurry version of myself in the mirror, and I had to see what I was going to look like, with it in my mouth. It was such a strange thing. And I mean, going through the motions is the next step to doing it, because you're working through the routine. You do it without any guns in the bullet, or you do it without any bullets in the gun, just to see what that feels like. Then you put the bullets in, and then you see what that feels like. Without pulling the trigger, obviously. And then you put your finger on the trigger, right? Then you cock the trigger, and then and then so it's these stages. And I remember thinking, like, I can't yet. And it was just a thought that just stuck in my head. Not yet. And so I didn't. But it was the tail end of going to school, and I was burnt out, and falling in with the wrong people to be around when it came to blowing off steam, and drinking. Drinking is the worst thing that you can do if you have depression. And so I don't do it as much anymore. And I used to drink a lot. And nothing ever good came from it. I honestly can say that, looking back, and I've had some good times with some good friends, but there has been no decision that I've made when I was drunk and feeling depressed that ended up being a good decision. And I can't say that for, say, being high, for instance. Like, I don't go pick a fight when I'm high, right? But I'll take some shots and start a fight. And so that's sort of what I'm looking at. The decisions that I make under the influence of certain things. You got to look at the end game. What, like, how has your life improved doing this on a regular basis. And I couldn't see any major. Yeah, it makes conversation easy. It can make it fun. And I will have drinks with friends, and I usually reserve the time I'm going to get drunk under a controlled environment around people I trust for that very reason, because they're not going to let me do anything stupid, and I can control it enough to be able to have it happen and not become addicted to it. You know, that's very helpful. But I slowed down on drinking considerably, and it helped. It helped a lot. So I'm going to talk about weed for a little bit then. And there is just so much bullshit surrounding the topic of weed and how it might help or hurt depression. And the bottom line as it stands right now is nobody knows. So, you know, when you see these fucking articles being put out on, you know, this pseudoscience shit or this, you know, these stupid little science articles that people share all over the internet, that's like picking and choosing, you know, small little case studies and presenting it like science. It's bullshit. The biggest, we don't know. We don't know fully what weed does because it just hasn't been allowed to be studied. So studying is, you know, there's more being found out now than ever before, and that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, it's still something that doesn't have a yes or no, like help or hinder sort of judgment. I've done a lot of experimenting with weed. Having lived in a grow house for a year, I got to plenty experiment. And so here's what I found. Okay, smoking weed can help you. Smoking weed can hurt you. In a couple different ways, okay? How it hurts you is if I'm feeling down or I'm feeling obsessive. Smoking too much sativa can worsen those things. Well, shit, as well as smoking indica. So, sativa and indica, let me break that down first. Sativa is more upbeat kind of high, right? It's more for active and doing, and makes you can make you feel more energetic. Can make you, you know, want to just get lost in something and do it, right? Indica is what a lot of people associate with like being couch stoned, and but more, it's more about feeling relaxed and feeling you know, at ease. There's the hybrid. And the hybrid can go across the spectrum. It can either lean towards sativa or it can lean towards indica, or you can have a sativa dominant indica and an indica dominant sativa sort of melded together for a hybrid. So in other words, hybrids can just range the full spectrum. And when this happens, you're talking about effects, right? How things affect you when you're considered officially stoned. However many puffs that it takes or inhalations that it takes for you to get the full effect of the high. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to underdo it. You want to do just enough to where you get that high, and then you can understand really what it's doing. And so you're looking at a full range of effects from, you know, feeling talkative, giddy, you know, relaxed, like you want to work, like you want to sleep, like it can make you feel mindless. You know, sometimes I would smoke certain indica after a hard day because I just wanted to shut my brain off and watch something stupid. So you can do things intentionally to just induce a state of mind using it, and it can be beneficial or hurtful. Now, where I found the biggest harms is smoking an indica when I'm feeling very depressed, in the feeling the nothing kind of depression. You can smoke the indica and it doesn't relax you anymore. It just intensifies the feeling of nothing. I don't know how common that is for everybody. You know, I'm just speaking to my own effects. But I avoid indica only during those times. And but I avoid sativa more so. I generally avoid sativa over indica because for the most part I need to just relax because I'm in full blown freak out mode, and any stimulation is ridiculously stressful, and so I need to slow down my reaction time to where I can see that coming and be able to stop myself, and so being relaxed when you're feeling anxiety, that is very helpful, and I find that to be extremely helpful, more so than smoking sativa, to where like I'm more easy to get amped up. I have a very easy tendency to get hyped up over things, and smoking sativa doesn't make that any easier unless I have something I can directly put all my energies into. And even then, if I'm not in the right state of mind when that happens, it goes downhill. And so you can ride the high out, or you can just eat something and just stuff your face, and the high will go away that much faster. Exercise, and then like with sativa, it's like the last time I had a bad high with it, I just freaking did a bunch of push-ups and stuffed my face and took a shower, and I was feeling good. The high isn't going to last that long, so it's like the paranoid effects that you might feel, or I think everybody, you've been around the person who's is having a bad high, they're freaking out, it's most likely because they don't have the personality type to handle sativa, and they smoked it, and yeah, they just need to eat. Just give them some food, send them on their way. I've had the most success with hybrids, and now, so what's happening in the pot world is that the whole of the industry is learning more and striving to learn more and striving to catalog it, and in some ways it's happening from the ground up. You have different websites like Leafly.com that has a really comprehensive review of all the different strains. And so now what they're starting to do is they're starting to track the effects of what each strain is doing, and then specifically breed plants, hybrid plants that address these issues. So you can go to the grow shop now, and you can specifically look for something that treats depression, for instance. I say treats, that helps with depression or anxiety, or pain, or inflammation. They are starting to isolate these strains and the effects that they cause to deliver a more concentrated, a specific kind of high. And so there's just a full range of kinds of high that you can experience. And it's strange, but the most successful high that I have is when I'm either smoking straight THC through oil, and oil is going to be has been the most effective for me because vapor is easier than smoke, and I'm an asthmatic, so it burns at a lower temperature, so it's less harsh on the lungs. You need less of it. You need to smoke it a lot less. And when I'm smoking something that affects that or helps with depression, it is I don't feel that high. So a few things are happening. I tend to laugh more when I'm high. Obviously, you feel more relaxed. I also want to eat, and that's not something that I want to do when I'm depressed. I'll forget to eat, and so already that's two things that it's doing that helps, right? Laughter and eating, and that can help kick you into feeling better about yourself right off the bat. So I try to smoke either straight THC, or I experiment with hybrid strains that target depression or anxiety specifically, so that I can take it, and I usually take it on the regular, like every day. But that could be like, okay, so not necessarily getting high every day, like high as you would say, like you get stoned and then you just sit there, but more so like if I feel anxiety coming, sometimes just knowing that I have the pen on me is a relief. And I'll take the pen before I'll do something like take Xanax, because the side effects to the weed are far more manageable than the side effects to any medication that you could take, any other medication that you could take, especially in pill form. When you're looking at prescription meds, if you're susceptible to side effects, like I am, you're going to feel them acutely with these medicines, with these prescription meds. Or there's a chance that you could feel them more acutely, and that is another set of problems in itself to have to deal with. And so I have found that dealing with the side effects of weed are just more manageable. Like smoking too much can bring about problems in much the same way. People say, "Oh, you can't get addicted to pot," and yeah, you can. If you're not in a good state of mind, for instance, and if you don't have a healthy mind, you can become addicted to anything, first and foremost. Secondly, anything that alters your mental state can be addictive, just by nature of the fact that it's altering your mental state. You can become addicted to not feeling like yourself, and humans in general want that, right? We're all striving to not feel like ourselves, or to feel like better, different versions of ourselves. Whether you exercise, you want that natural high. You're into coffee. You're into uppers. You're into downers. You're into something that induces a mental state that gives you one effect or feeling over another. And so I feel like as a whole, humans are just addicted to feeling different mental states that vary from the norm that they have to be in on a daily basis, regularly. We're always looking for contrast. So, hanging out with stoners a lot, I can tell you, they can get addicted to it. It isn't always good, and smoking too much is bad for you. And it makes you extra paranoid. Extra paranoid. You will feel like people are out to get you. And it's so stupid not to attribute it to weed at this point, because it's just the fucking stereotype, right? Everyone knows that stereotype. So there are harms. There are harmful effects to it at the same time, and it's something that you have to exercise caution with when exploring. But know that humans co-evolved with the THC and the plant, and as well as other drugs that are illegal. Like there's a lot of good headway being made with psilocybin, with shrooms in treating depression. I used to do shrooms when I could get them, and I actually found that it did help. I realized, because I've done way too many shrooms, and overused the drug, obviously, of course, because of addictive personality. But when I wasn't abusing it, I was experimenting with it. And when I experimented with it, I used to just eat small sections of the stem, or just very, very small sections of it. And I wouldn't get any hallucinogenic effects from it. It would just make me feel upbeat, happy in general. And it seemed to last. So a bag of shrooms would last me forever, because I was just eating tiny bits of it, and I was starting to feel like shit. And that was before any of the studies came out at the time. It was just experimenting with drugs. I was bored. I was like, I'm gonna walk around the neighborhood and just nibble on some shrooms and see what happens, and then discovering that it made me feel great, So there really isn't enough knowledge about, or research done about, the drugs that America has deemed illegal. So I've been open to those far more than I have prescription drugs. And but again, coming up to the depression being more extreme and harder for me to deal with, and me worried about it affecting my personal life, more so now, and even my career, I'm starting to look at medications, more prescription medications, just to maybe see how I can use them to help me get over things. Because where things are difficult for me now is I can go to work for somebody else, no problem, because it's not my life, it's not my business, it's not I have less vested in it, and it is easy for me to have my purpose be in supporting somebody else, and in the end I make money and I get to support myself, right? So I'm going to work for somebody else, and I have no problem with that. The idea of working for myself is extremely difficult because I feel worthless, and I hate my art, and why am I doing this? And okay, so and all these things start to come up. You start to feel depressed, and it's like, well, what point is there in investing in myself when I'm useless, when I'm pointless, when I'm all these things that I think of myself in feeling depressed? And then it's much easier to brush it off. It's much easier to feel insecure about promoting myself and selling myself and pursuing in our career in art as a painter, because of fear of success, and having that success mean that I have to be emotionally stable and be able to be more reliable so that I can be successful. You have to be reliable if you're successful. And so that's where I'm running up against issues, is I don't feel reliable emotionally. I don't feel like I can count on myself, and because of that, because of all that, it's holding me back. And I can produce artwork, I can make the art. That's not a problem. I can show up every day and I can make the art. But how do you sell yourself when you hate yourself? Not every day, not as a general. I mean, I say that very loosely, but that's just kind of what comes up, right? Oh, you shouldn't hate yourself. You should have positive feelings about yourself. You should care about yourself. Self-care is very difficult for people in general. And then you add depression on top of that, and it's like, well, who cares even more? And that's an aspect of suicide that people don't realize exists. Suicide isn't just killing yourself immediately. Suicide can take many forms. You can give up in life and just not have the courage to kill yourself and think, okay, well, I'll just let life take me. I don't have to be responsible for anything. So that's a nice out. And I can just ride this thing called life until I'm done. And along the way, you let yourself go, and you stop caring, and you just start doing things for immediate gratification. And it's a different form of suicide. And I've seen people do it in multiple ways. It's hard to call that suicidal, but in my mind, somebody who has given up on life and smokes themselves into oblivion on a daily basis, doing nothing but going from one altered state to the next, from caffeine to weed to just going from one thing to the next to distract your mind from the fact that you hate your life, and that is suicide too. You might as well kill yourself, right? You might as well just do it right then and there, because what ends up happening is you live out the course of your life being greater and greater disappointment of the people around you, and you increase your amount of suffering. And when you increase your amount of suffering, you become more vindictive. You start lashing out at people around you for the pain that you've been causing yourself. And so it's a terrible thing that can happen. And I'm not saying you should just kill yourself, right? If you're feeling these things, if you're stuck into something like this, right, you shouldn't just kill yourself, but you should also think that what better, if you look at what's happening, you're not helping anybody. If you find yourself in a point in life where you're doing more harm than good, realize that you can do more good. It just is very difficult to change those routines, to get yourself out. So you have two choices. You have more than two choices. You have infinite choices, but there's only a couple choices before you when you're stuck in this long-term suicide that can happen, and that is just going ahead and doing it, or working to get out of it. And so this has been sort of where I've come to as I've come out of it over this last few months at the early start of the year, is a different kind of feeling like maybe of having just given up in life and just going through the motions. A sense of a lack of purpose and a sense of dread, no way to see out of it without the conviction to, you can lose your sense of conviction, you can lose your sense of motivation, you can feel like there is no point to trying anything. So having a series of failures can lay you low, but there is joy to be had in life. There's a lot of joy to be had in life. There's a lot of achievement to be gotten. And it feels good to do difficult things. It does. And for as scary as it feels, it still feels good accomplishing things, right? And so you always have to have goals. You always have to have something that you can accomplish. You always have to see a way out, and it helps to try to help people. It helps to try to help yourself. But if you can, I'm looking to find ways to help other people and help myself. And I feel like that's the best of both worlds. And so that's why teaching has been what saved me these last 2 years. And because I've been able to help other people and show them my passion, which is art. But having a passion is not enough. People say, "Oh, well, you have art, and that's your purpose, right? Oh, that's enough. That would be enough for me." And maybe it is. Maybe it is enough for people, but it obviously hasn't been enough for Robin Williams, and it wasn't enough for Chester, and it wasn't enough for anybody else who has committed suicide, who happened to be an artist or had a family, or none of those things are enough. That was the realization I came to just recently. Suffering this deeper bout of depression, is that I thought that if I could just do art every day, that would be it. I'd feel good, right? That was the goal. And then I achieved it, and of course under strange circumstances, but at this point I can do art every day. Even though I don't, and I should, but I can do art every day. That's not enough. It doesn't make me feel. It doesn't make the depression any less severe when it happens. It doesn't make the suicide or the feelings of suicide go away any faster. The fact that I have a skill, doesn't change the fact that when the depression comes on, it doesn't matter that I have the skill. I still feel useless, and the skill is just something for me to direct my ire at. And I can say, well, look at all this fucking skill that I have, and I still feel like shit. I still don't have a purpose in life, or I still don't feel like I have a purpose in life, even though my purpose is to be an artist, So you can have a purpose in life and still feel like you don't. You can have a purpose in life and still feel useless and depressed and all these things, This illness doesn't discriminate. Doesn't make anything easier, really. And so you have to find something else in life. You cannot rest on the fact that if you dedicate yourself to a purpose or a goal, that's going to be enough to stop you from killing yourself when the feelings come on. Because what's happening is you're looking for a way to end the suffering in any way that you can, and sometimes the most sensible way is to end your life. So at least that's the most sensible. This is coming from the mentality of having these feelings, is that like sometimes that makes sense. You think like, and I guess if you're having a hard time relating to this, if you're having a hard time understanding what it means, you need to think about what it would take, what conditions would come, what sort of conditions could happen to you personally to where you would feel like death is a reasonable way out. Those conditions are there for everybody. Everybody has their limits, right, in life. It doesn't matter how strong you are or how strong you think you are. You have your limits. If you don't understand what suicide is, you don't understand what it means to feel suicidal, that's okay. But you should at least try to bring yourself to the point where you can understand that there are situations where death makes sense. It doesn't mean it's right. It just makes sense. And then I think maybe you'll get a better understanding of why someone might conclude that. Because there are conditions, because everybody, there are conditions that will, because there are conditions that could make anybody want to think that. You just haven't found those conditions yet, or you haven't been in them, you haven't experienced them to know that that would be a reasonable conclusion that you reach. Well, there's no way out of this. The best decision is to die. The other thing I want to talk about is I want to make a case for suicide and at the same time against it, right? So when you're looking at people who are suicidal, and again, it's breaking down this word because it's a complicated word. You can want to die and not be suicidal. And this comes into this whole Dr. Kevorkian-esque, assisted suicide. There are a lot of blowback against that because people don't want to think about death, and it's a scary thing to think about, and it's big. But if you've tried everything you can in life and nothing works, what avenue do you have left, right? Don't we always have the choice? Shouldn't we have the right to choose life or death? And isn't there a way that it can be done properly? I think there are ways that it can be done properly. I think there's a right way to kill yourself, and I think there's a wrong way to kill yourself. If there is no more good to be gained by your life, if you are in a position where you are needlessly suffering and you feel nothing but agony and there is no way out, and that is what your life is, if that's the case, you could make an argument that suicide is the most humane thing to do in that situation. There are inhumane ways to do it. There are humane ways to do it, right? If we were in a society that had a healthy view of life, a healthy view of death, then we would have a society that could say, look, there are going to be situations where death is the only humane option left because this person is suffering. They want to end their life for reasons that most humans are never going to be able to comprehend, because most people are never going to experience the insane amount of suffering that can happen when your body's being eaten away by cancer, for instance, or when your brain has an illness that is so severe that no more medications don't work. There is nothing to be done. There are some people with mental illnesses that are so severe that cause such an extreme amount of suffering that this person's life there is no good that can come from it anymore. And so I feel like there should be a way out for those people. There should be a way out for somebody who has come to the conclusion, given all these factors, that death is just the best thing. But with a system like that would come an outlook on mental health that would be more positive for people suffering it as a whole. Because I feel like if you were to look at what it would take to provide a service such as assisted suicide, setting up a program that looks at everything, that studies what this is, what's happening in the brain, why someone might come to this conclusion, then it forces, people to have to address all the ways that you could stop it and prevent it. And it would increase mental health assistance for people as a whole. And it would just make, I think, the quality of life for people who might feel like they want to commit suicide, it'll help show them a way out of it, because there are steps that you can take to get out of it. And if you provide an avenue for people to pursue these things, then you should also responsibly show them all the ways that they could get out of it before pursuing it. So that might be a terrible thing to some people to have, to think about, and it might sound like a terrible and inhumane thing to say, but I don't think it is, and I don't think and I don't want to see people commit suicide. I don't want to see anybody die needlessly ever, and I don't want to commit suicide. Even when I feel like I want to I feel like I want to die, I still don't want to die, right? And it's this conflicted sort of back and forth that happens that can be very frustrating. So yeah, it is. It's a complicated subject, and it's something that I really wanted to talk about. Chester's death just really hit me hard, and especially after coming out of this depression that I had been in more severely earlier in the year, and so yeah, those are my thoughts so far. I hope to cover this again. Maybe I'll go over everything that I said, and if I can cover it, there's always going to be things to talk about as far as mental health goes. My artwork is starting to head in that direction more so, not by accident, obviously. And so talking about these things more openly has really been something that I've been planning for, to do with not only dialogue but with art, and I've made a few pieces concerning it, just to try to explore it, and yeah, so there will always be more to talk about, and I've rambled about this long enough. So yeah, that is this week's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are, I don't know if anybody's listening to this, but if you are, thank you very much. And I will be talking at you here soon.